Alright, hello everybody out there. This is my video log of my latest Hyperpin that I just got done building. I was lucky enough to get a Williams Tomcat, and the irony is that this is the first machine that I actually got as an adult, and really got me back into my pinball fever. The fact that it had a better cabinet than the one that I had purchased was really awesome. I had to pay a premium price. If you look at this, this is just the back box, side, and there goes another side of it. After I purchased it and got it home, and like I said, I did have to pay a premium price for it, but it did not have, it didn't have anything in it. The owner was a coin-op guy who had purchased it to actually kind of like restore his, but it was only going to be for resale value, and it would, mark his up, more than, maybe the 600 that he was going to try to get. Maybe he would be able to get, 1,000 or 1,100 for it afterwards. But nevertheless, I ended up getting it from him, and I was very thankful. If you look at the here to here, obviously this had legs on it, and generally speaking, whenever you take legs off, you see a big difference in the paint. Like, hey, this is where the sun was hitting it, especially in reds. That's where reds is the #1 color to fade. So if you look at this, you can see how well that this was kept as far as away from the light goes. He said that he had this for a long time. I'm not sure how long, but nevertheless, I just covering the different sides of the cabinet, and the fact that I have F14 Tomcat as my icon on YouTube and the Hyperspin forums, is actually because it was the first pin that got me back into the game, into pins. The back box, I already cleaned it out, gutted it. When I say that, of course, it didn't come with any boards, but did have, a big metal backing, etc. I already cleaned it up. Once I got into the backyard, I took out the generic subwoofer, the little on and off switch, and a lot of the parts on the inside. It did not have a coin door, as well as it did not, I was going to say it did not have a lock bar, but I see a picture of a lock bar, or I see a lock bar in my picture. Something's wrong with that. Oh yeah, that's right. It did not have a lock bar, but I end up talking the guy into, swapping me a Gottlieb lock bar for a Cyclone lock bar, which fit perfect. So the guy still hooked me up with a lock bar. It was kind of like a swap. I had to give up something for it, and then of course I still paid my premium price. Now over here, you can see the different holes that were already there. The reason why I say that is because this hole eventually ends up being a subwoofer port. This is the cabinet on its side with the neck, and the neck's kind of cracked up, but it didn't really matter too much because I'm going to end up cutting out the neck. Another picture of the neck, as well as, like the nails that I had to remove, for the side rail. Once I got the side rail off, you could see how the black paint didn't fade either. So once again, this is just, a really awesome to work with cabinet, and it really was a tough choice that I made to sand it down, because I was sitting there thinking, an F14 Tomcat logo on the side wouldn't be bad, but I like the artwork that I've made and in the past, and I really wanted it to be like a multi-game thing on the side. I didn't want it to be just a one game kind of thing. I started to kind of like notice that a little bit was flaking off, so I went ahead and just kind of like picked this off with my hands. When I say picked it off, I mean it just kind of like cracked off as I peeled it away, kind of like bark. And I'd rather peel off while before putting wood filler and sanding it and painting it. It's just so much easier to repair ahead of time than for it to fall off afterwards and have to start all over again. Took the side rail off from the other side, And this is a picture of my barbecue grill as I'm taking parts out, and the other side of the barbecue grill. I had, it came with the wire mesh for the ventilation on the back. Over here, I have the neck that I cut out. You can see that it isn't quite perfect. It's really hard to get like a straight line. Now, of course, this side is easier because I can, lock something down and go with the straight line for here. But as far as here goes, I had to do that with a different tool. Instead of my circular saw, I had to use a jigsaw. I put wood filler or wood epoxy, quick wood, in the little cracks of the legs, as well as the this big area that I showed that was all messed up earlier. A little bit more wood filler, more wood filler, more wood filler. It's better to get it all. I even put a little wood filler here on the uneven cuts, because I know I didn't cut it that great, but you put the wood filler and then afterwards you sand it and it comes out okay. Kind of another picture of the button area. This button, of course, is made for a real pinball button instead of like a HAP controls button, so you end up having to cut out that button. I got my Sharp Aquos LED TV from Amazon as new, and whenever I got it, it had some I'm gonna say tape peeling right here and a big gash right here, and they actually dropped off the TV in my backyard. They opened up the fence, threw it back there, and didn't have anybody sign for it, and they took off. I came home and found my TV and I was happy, and then right afterwards I was like, damn. So I took a whole bunch of pictures. As I was opening it, it was like, whoa, this is, oh no, I'm gonna end up with a broken TV. Like, they squished it, broke the styrofoam. I was really scared at this point, and I started thinking, this is all bad. As I was taking stuff out, I was trying to document as well as possible, hey, this is how I got it in case something was wrong. I thought there was going to be another picture. Nevertheless, it turned out that it was fine. So it was just one of those fears, but Amazon is great because you don't pay taxes. You end up with a really awesome return policy. They'll even pick it up shipping for free. Here I drew my subwoofer, how it was going to lay. I cut out the subwoofer for the bottom facing down, and the port lined up with it perfect. This is two fans, fan hole cutouts, and over here I went with two fan cutouts. The reason for that was, I know that the computer's gonna go on the tray. I thought about putting it behind the tray, different spots, but I ended up going with this because I know that even though I might wire the coin door and I might put a coin box someday, there's really no purpose of the coins in the coin door, and I'm not gonna have coins flying through there because this isn't for vending or routing or anything like that. So I went with the fans in the front, the extra fans. It would help with the two VGA cards that I get, or it's the ventilation is more important than the coin box. That was kind of like my idea. So with the rails on the old cabinets that I've done, the rails stopped over here in this area, and I built this really nice wall, and after I built it I smoothed it out. It was so great, and I was sitting there thinking this is gonna look good because whenever I put my cabinet on top, I could even leave this piece of wood, whenever I put my back box on top, it's gonna lay on top. Leave this, this will be my strength or my reinforcement. But this is just going to be to hide the looks, make it kind of like a finishing touch. This was before the sanding. I know it would have been better to show the other picture first, but this is before the sanding on the other side. I don't have a picture of it, but later on I realized, let me back up, later on I realized that my rail actually goes all the way back to here. Like a dumbass, I should have checked that first. So nevertheless, I end up using my jigsaw and cutting this actually out and refilling it and resanding the spots. Oh, that sucked. Yeah, life isn't always beautiful. I got my buttons. Whenever I got my buttons, compared to the other setups I've done, you know, I add an extra ball button. But this kind of gives you an idea of, you know, how the LED button styles work. You know, you take them apart. After taking them apart, you can, you know, I mean, if you want to just leave them like this and put on an instruction card saying yellow is this, or, you know, yellow equals start. But I took them apart, made my own little inserts, taped them, you know, to the insides. You lock them in, and you know, there's four little points to there, and you lock in 2 of them, and those 2 kind of coincide with the back snaps, so they don't wiggle, so to speak. When I say wiggle, I mean when you tighten them up, they will no longer spin. Another picture of it, I guess without the lights. This was me kind of like decasing my my 40-inch LED. I had to take off a little piece back here and take out this piece, and I think I unscrewed most everything at this point. I took the back completely off. Now I still was left with the front. You can see that the smaller panel in the front is still there as well, because you got the little speakers, as well as the IR connections. And these little things can disconnect, you know, over here, and you can take the tape off and kind of retape it, you know, the excess wires where you need to. That's the big subwoofer in the middle. That's a joke. As well as, you know, the front speakers, stock speakers. There's little clips that are like a little pain in the ass whenever you're taking off the front side. Over here you have to like unclip this, which is a plastic piece of the front portion of the bezel. But nevertheless, there's also these extra metal pieces that also hook onto the back side. You can see the metal piece hooked on right here. So you have to unsnap this, and then the plastic side you have to unsnap as well. It's kind of like a double work job. Now over here I was cutting out where the 40-inch is going to lay. So the 40-inch is going to lay here. I cut out, if you look at the measurements here, it's about 1 inch down, and that was enough for my monitor to lay, as well as the bezel, and then, you know, the glass goes pretty much just like about a 1/4 inch on top. Of course, you know, I cut out the length that where I wanted the monitor to kind of start and where I wanted to kind of end. Finally, I'm getting to the painting, which is the good stuff. You could actually see your product starting to come together instead of, you know, being in the destruction mode. I got the subwoofer in there, as well as a couple of the external power supplies and fans. Some more fans in the motherboard tray, the power on button. A front view of exactly the same thing that I just showed you. This is actually how well the subwoofer port lined up on the back of my cabinet. So the inside right here is the subwoofer, and the outside is the back of the cabinet. Now this was where the power cable came out of the F-14 Tomcat. OMFG, I was so happy that lined up perfect. I couldn't have cut a better hole. I got my GTX 285s. I got 2 of them on eBay as new in box, non-retail OEM white box for GTX 285's OC GE Forces. I was thrilled to find them. You know, you can't find the 200 series in stores, so getting them on eBay is about the best way to go, and be able to get new in box, non-retail. I was thrilled. And yes, it had every single little adapter that you could think of that would come with a retail box, but just it came in a white box. This is them installed. I have no idea why they had all these little markings that looked like fingerprints, but they were so perfect on one of them, and the other one didn't really have any. These smudges were probably from me, but they both came at the same time. Kind of like got an idea of the motherboard, etc. Now, under this, one of these power supply cables, I needed to get underneath here and bring up on this side. Later on I'll tell you why and how, you know, because this is kind of like a nice little inside motherboard wood tray that I was able to slide one of the cable. Oh yeah, that's right, I put my SSD over here, so I wanted to slide one of the cables underneath the wooden portion over here, and then come back up over here and plug in. I'll show you how I did that a little bit later. I got my RGB LEDs, and this one I ordered 6, 3 for the topper and 3 for the back box. Had to get, of course, 12 of one resistor and 6 of another. This was my computer case after I took the motherboard tray out, which is kind of the leftover parts. And this is how I was able to slide my power cable to my SSD, because normally it comes with these connectors in the middle, and in order for it to fit, I had to take that connector from the middle out, and I kind of like just jammed a screwdriver in there, popped this portion off, and then after popping that portion off, I seen how it was connected, popped those out individually, wrapped up each one, and after I wrapped up each one individually, wrapped up the whole thing, and I was good to go. Then it slid underneath that little tray. Here I got my my iPack wired to my 3 buttons, or 3 front buttons, as well as my tilt sensors. Those are the mini Mercury switches that I get from Australia, from jcar.au, I believe it is. Of course, this is my side button, the bottom one wired. The top one can't be wired until I, get it kind of assembled. I got the iPad or the LED whiz over here, but I don't have it wired because it's going to be like one of my last things. Here I was test fitting my my 28-inch LCD. You can see my 3 holes still, because it's an F14. And of course we got about, I think it was about 2 inches grand total that I had to cut off. Or maybe it was less. It doesn't look like that much over here. But nevertheless, it was kind of like a test fit, make sure things fit, including the speakers. Over here you can see how I got this, oh, by the way, this is actually a stern speaker panel. The stern speaker panel, I got it to fit by using these little L brackets and bending them with 2 wrenches until they kind of like hooked on. It worked out great. Kind of like a picture of just the mess that you get whenever you're building this kind of stuff. Of course I got, the Klipsch, subwoofers, the generic computer case, because I was just going to tear it off, the Hans G, the Dell 17-inch LCD widescreen, as well as my Pinball Life stern speaker panel and the glass trim. So another picture, my Asus mother box, got the fans. Man, it was a mess. I mean, you got to imagine 6 to 8 weeks of getting it done. Kind of like to show you how I like to cut straight cuts at least. Yeah, my kind of like my alignment tool, and it clamps down, and this is kind of like me cutting off one side of it, cutting off that amount that needed to be cut off. Now over here I had to re-glue. I'm kind of like, I went through this a little earlier and I was trying to remember exactly what it is, but I believe I re-glued a different, I had to cut off the original panel, the original front panel, because this was not close enough forward for me. So after re-gluing this front panel, then I end up cutting in a little bit more deeper all the way out to here, and then I was able to push my 17-inch monitor far enough forward that I was happy. The 17-inch kind of like I guess what you'd call wall mount brackets, homemade of course. A little picture of the mess still. I used wood epoxy in here. I used about somewhere around $10 in this little patch, and I realized that this just wasn't going to work because this was still not enough to fill up this hole. I mean, it filled up the hole, but if I went to sand this, you would still see a whole bunch of holes. So I went ahead and just used the drywall patch for the rest. While I was doing that, while I was waiting for some of that to dry, I cut out a panel in the back, added 2 fans. I sanded this one time, and I realized, of course, how much this still didn't sand. You can see the parts that were sanded, so in other words, this was above the line, everything else wasn't. And of course, I, did more putty or drywall filler. And of course, had to wait for it to dry a couple days. This was my front panel after I re-added that piece and then did the wood filler for underneath and on the sides. Had to sand it down till it looked nice. This was my soldering job on one of the LEDs. You can see how this is kind of like an example of a cold solder joint and another one that wasn't good. These are, nicer. This is kind of like perfect with the mount, but it's kind of like in the danger zone of like too much. But I think these ones are pretty good. This one obviously is way not enough, or way too little, as well as it's a cold joint. But just kind of want to show you guys how this whole process works. The resistors that I get are too big, so I cut them down because whenever I end up soldering them, I don't want to have to be have these heck long cables to deal with, or wires. I mean, already even whenever I cut them down, they still seem to be pretty long. I end up having to tape each one individually, and I used quick connectors. These actually came from the fans, since I wasn't going to really use them from the fans that I purchased, and there was 6 of them, so there was 6 RGB LEDs. So hey, perfect sense, right? A little kind of details of how I got the monitor to mount down. Now, for the meantime, what I did is I put in 4 screws, long screws, into the actual base of the cabinet from the back box. So that was actually like my locking technique, from the back box into the cabinet for temporary. You could also see how I mounted this speaker up against here with this bracket. Now, at the bottom there's a little 45-degree wood chip piece, and that's actually pushing it into the air about a quarter of, maybe half of an inch, so it's not touching the ground, so it can't like slide around with this little bracket, amazingly. Another kind of a close-up, and this one is actually going into the base of the cabinet. This one is just for the 17-inch monitor, and this one is once again just supporting this and locking in the speakers. You can see how the speaker is elevated on both sides, and of course my back panel is cut out, and it looks like it's a TV there, but that's actually my subwoofer. The back panel, what's kind of unique about this part is whenever I painted this, I kept the Williams tag on there with F14, because I wanted people to see the manufacture date and what it really was originally. And you can kind of see my RGBs. Actually, you don't see the RGBs, but you just see the wiring for it with the quick connectors. A little bit of my cabinet on the inside. Of course, I don't have the shaker motor yet. Shaker motor starts off being here, but I end up moving it to right there. Another picture of it. Finally get a test going. On this one, I went ahead and added one of these little fans. It does some little advertising for me. You could program them, I think, with 16 different advertisements. I'll go into details on that in my YouTube video, so you'll have to check the video of it. Right now you can see some paint over there. Whenever I painted the insides, I didn't remove this, but it didn't matter because I really just flipped it over afterwards, and it looks like new from the outside now anyways. A kind of little bit of the frame mat alignment. And of course I had to cut out these corners of the frame mat while Michael's cut out the outside as well as the inside, and I cut out these. And this is kind of like the thermal adhesive, part A, part B. The measurements, I really don't know off the top of my head exactly what the measurements were. And this was kind of like getting the RGBs through the back box to the topper. Once again, I used wood epoxy here as well as paper to make sure that it didn't adhere to the 40-inch LED. Yes, there is a lot of possible problems that could happen. I could imagine a million things that I could have done wrong. Luckily, I didn't damage anything. No shortages, no fouls. You can see a picture of how I got the RGB LEDs to the top wired as well as to the fans. Or RGBs, no, but the powers go into the fans. And of course, this folds right up. And it looks like that when it's closed. I still need to add a little lock there, or if not a lock, something just to screw it in so it can't come down. Right now it kind of like locks into place, or it's kind of like tight, but I would hate for somebody to shake it and for it to fall. My side rails would not fit with the newer style hinges, back box hinges, so I actually had to drill out some holes enough so that way the hinges could fit in there. Here goes my other RGB LEDs that are in the play field, so to speak. I just used these same same L brackets, and using this came out of the back box, I believe it was. Maybe not this back box, maybe a different back box from a different project. But I wired up these ones to the 5 volts. I figured I didn't need it as bright if it's going to be closer to me. Now I cut out holes in a sample piece of matte material. Afterwards I cut out the holes and then I laid them on top and then taped them to there, and then I could kind of line up exactly where it was going to be on my existing mat, because I didn't really want to screw up on my existing mat. Going back, here I got my LED whiz wired up, the USB plugged in. Got the H bridge wired to my shaker motor, my SSD SATA3, yes, SATA3. My 5 volts are on the bottom. My wiring is not beautiful. I know it's not. I know I should have used like some kind of red wire, green wire, yellow wire, indicating red being 5 volt, yellow being 12 volt, or something like that. Yes, but after taking this picture, I did end up telling myself, okay, this just isn't quite cool enough. So I end up taking both these out, dipping them in some flux, soldering them, to making them, like nice and strong, and trimmed them the right size, put them in there perfect. So this is actually looks better now. And that's exactly what I did with this. Is I did the same exact thing. So this right now looks like this. Shaker motor first install, which was going to be an issue with the power supply cable because it didn't want to go. But not only that, it kind of like shook the holes loose, and once it shook the holes loose, I was like, okay, you know what, this area ain't gonna work anyways. I found a new home for it. Kind of like a picture of my stern speaker panel with the grills and the glass installed. The glass was, I believe, 1/2 inch. I'm not really sure on that. Could have been 3/8. But the glass comes with these little cork sticky pieces. Putting those in made it nice and tight, so that was cool. A little picture of the other side, of course, with the little locking bracket that I talked about earlier. My frame mat, and for the back glass, I need to test drive it because this model, it has the wood piece right here, and I wanted to, I kind of was cool with that. In other words, it's about 3/4 of an inch behind the back, where the back glass is. The back glass isn't going to be touching the monitor. So I wanted to kind of like test fit my frame mat Of course, I kind of like taped it up, made it look nice. And whenever I got it to where I was happy with it, then I went ahead and ordered the one from Michaels, but I just didn't want it to be cut exactly the same size and then be 3/4 of an inch away and look funny. You know, I wouldn't. You know, that would suck. You know, so this is kind of like what it looked like when it was on. Now, when I said that, you know, you got like a little 3D depth thing going on, you know, so people can kind of like walk up to the side and see on the inside. You know, it doesn't bother me. I'm cool with that. I gotta take these little stickers off still. I haven't done that yet, but this is still the test run. No, and of course straight ahead. Whenever I went to Michael's, this is what I came up with for the test, for what I wanted them to do for the real one. This measurement ended up being wrong, or at least one of them is, you know. But this one I believe was the one that was wrong. It was supposed to be like 1 3/8 inches instead of 2 1/8. And this was after I got the real frame mat. I kind of like just taped the top, taped the bottom. It looks like I didn't get a picture of it after I did it, but got the logo almost the same width as my back box. Printed it out in paint, and then started trimming it with my X-Acto knife. After I trimmed it all out, I painted it. Yes, I suck at painting. If you want to laugh at it, go ahead. Please don't add a comment. I already know that it's, you know, I'm not the super artistic painting person. But it has 3, you know, the black it was a black core mat, so I didn't have to do the black, but whenever I did the white, you know, it was kind of like harder for me because I'm not really good with a paintbrush. But I'll end up trimming, I'll end up touching it up later with a black marker on the outside to fix the white portions that are kind of like going crazy. I got the decals finally and put those on. Putting this centerpiece always has to be first, in my opinion, at least, because you know, it's going to be kind of like the alignment tool for the other ones. You know, if you have this in the middle, it would suck. Like, for instance, if you did one right there to the bump or above the bump, and then you did the other side below the bump, and then you did this afterwards, and you realize that they didn't match, you'd be screwed. So anyways, I always do this first. It's always the hardest one as well, because you got that hole cut out. But what I do is I tape, and it's kind of like the same process, but you tape one side. You have, like in my case, I had my daughter lift it up, you know, leaving no slack till it was, you know, instead of down here, it was like way up here. And once it's way up there, I take a little bit of the saran off, or saran wrap, whatever, the film, lay down the first about 2 inches or so till about there, maybe 3 inches, and you press it down. And then after that, you have the person on that side go ahead and retape it, and then from that point you just pull the saran wrap, use a squeegee it, and then later use your own hand and just wipe it at the same time, because the wipe with your hand is going to give it the hard press, while the squeegee is going to, you know, kind of like push the air. Once again, using my X-Acto knife to cut out the side pieces, because obviously the side pieces, you know, came with it. From here, I started working on my topper. My topper has pinball flipper switches, or those pieces. I didn't really get a picture of the back of it, but you can see a little piece of it right there. But it also has one piece here, kind of like bent down, and it's super glued, and then afterwards electrical taped on the back, or I shouldn't say electrical taped, liquid electrical taped. So in other words, it's kind of like glued twice, one on the inside and one on the outside. This is another picture just that was out of order, and that concludes my little video log. Don't know about you if you're bored by this video or whatever, but it was kind of a long recording. It's probably going to take me about 15 hours to upload. Nevertheless, after I get done doing this one, I'm going to do my video of the actual Hyperpin, because it's already done, up and running, and I just want to show you guys how it looks. So feel free to click over here. I'll add my my video of the actual machine up and running. And if you liked my video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, please subscribe, because you might see some other cool stuff going on. And that buzzer was my laundry, so it's time for me to go. Thank you.